Prof, some people will say that, these plans are fine, and, quite a number of people are expecting so much because this government did promise quite a lot in terms of even welfare programs. But some people are saying, how realistic is that considering just where we are in terms of, what it is that we currently earn and what it is that we intend to spend? Did you hear me, Prof?
No, I didn't hear you, but I can surmise from what you just said. The problem is that you are saying we don't have enough money to be able to tackle all these laudable programs. Yes,
do you also get that feeling that we don't have enough money?
Well, yeah. I mean, we may not have the money to do everything we want, but by doing what we can call, creating what we call fiscal space, and it means trying to restructure existing programs in order to create rooms for other programs, for prioritized programs. As I've said, you can restructure the existing, let's say, portfolio of programs by the government, the balance sheet of the government. You can restructure it. There are some programs that are just not even necessary. You can take the money and use the money productively in other areas. So without even borrowing additional money, you can by just restructuring existing programs, you can do a lot. I mean, if you study the public sector very well, you will see that one of the fundamental characteristics of the public sector is fragmentation and duplication of functions. So you've got to really get those ones out. That's why even the president saying that he doesn't need that 7 ministers as well, it might be true. But there are quite a lot of, if you read the mandates of some of these public organizations, some of them are quite repetitive. Some of them are just repeating each other. And some of them are, so we need fragmentation. Just as the government is trying to do now with the Treasury single account, by bringing together all the bank accounts of the MDAs that are littered all around the place, and they're using as they like. So the government is now trying to have a unified a bank structure, which will enable the Treasury to have an overall view of the resources. The government has money in all bank accounts, and yet the government is still going around borrowing money because it doesn't have a complete view of his cash balances. But the TSA will enable the government to consolidate all these cash balances and use them very well. The TSA, for example, provides tremendous opportunities for effective cash management. For effective budget execution, because that's part of the thing that people complain about, that the money is not released on time. Now, because the government doesn't have the money, the government now goes to the bank again. The bank lends the money, the public sector deposits to the bank, charges interest rate. But with the Treasury single account, that will go. So all those exercises will now bring money back to the centralized place, and then the government will now be able to fund some of its activities. The government cannot fund all its activities. If the government doesn't want to borrow money, it doesn't have to borrow money. But it can still achieve a lot within its existing resources.
Some people have lauded, and I think not some, a lot of people have lauded the implementation of the TSA, but then they've also said that it does have its own, backlash. In recent times, some the ministries, the departments and agencies were complaining of a lack of, running cash, day-to-day cash that they needed to be able to conduct businesses. And then banks have also been complaining of a lack of liquidity. Do you also think that we've taken into cognizance the effect that this could have on ministries, departments and agencies on the one hand, and also banks?
Well, look, when something new is being introduced, the people will always complain. TSA is saying that there's no business as usual again. Nigeria is not the only country that is operating TSA. There are so many countries, UK, India, even African countries, and they are operating it successfully. So the problem that people are talking about, they are teaching problems. Once the dust settles, the TSA has been on since 2000. Yeah, 2000. It has been simmering, but people chose to ignore it. But now, when we have the political will in the present government to say, look, let us implement it, it's a good thing. All right? I cannot see why would the bank rely on public sector deposits? How do banks in other countries operate? Why can't they go and study how they operate? Why should they sit down here and then feel that they should just rely on public sector deposits? All right? Let them become innovative and imaginative. Don't let them sit down and then lend money belonging to the public sector back to the public sector at a ridiculous interest rate. I don't think banks are short of liquidity. It's just that if they're short of liquidity, they are suffering from their own lack of imagination and foresightful.
Well, you've also spoken about the need to streamline, the ministries, departments, and agencies that we have. This is something that's also been on the front burner for a while. The latest report I think we had was the Stephen Ransanye report, and quite a number of people were expecting action on that. And there have been rumors that this current government, is going to merge ministries, departments, and agencies. The question is, do you think that this information is not being passed out soon enough? If already 6 months into this administration, do you think that there seems to be a hurry to pass that message across in terms of the need to streamline with immediate effect some of these ministries, departments, and agencies?
Well, there's a need, but it has to be done carefully, as I've said. There's a need, as I've said, that to streamline the ministries. As I told you, most of the agencies have fragmented mandates. The mandates are quite conflicting. In fact, our government is dysfunctional, to be frank. So the earlier we streamline them, the better.
Which government agrees with? I mean, what I'm saying is the government agrees very much with that. From the last administration, the last report we got was the Stephen Ransanye report. But some people think that by now, we ought to have seen action on that.
Yes. It's like changing government is like moving a very heavy stone, on top of a steep hill. If the government wants to streamline and restructure, there must be some criteria that must be used, and it has to be very carefully done. For example, a lot of functions are performed by different agencies. We can have what we call one service cluster some of the services, so that somebody who wants to have a service will only have to go to one ministry and then get all these needs attended to. So there are quite a lot of. So the government has to be careful. We need to look at the functions of each of the ministries. I don't think the evaluation or before this is okay, but it's not deep enough. It has to be really studied to see which ministries perform the same functions. For example, if you take NAPEP, if you take NDE, if you take MDG, if you take SMEDAN, and all, you will see the same sort of functions running through some of their mandates. All right? And you will also see that if you look at other organizations too, the same thing happens. So why don't we take a step back and then say, look, we cannot have 10 organizations. Let me also tell you something before I forget. And the fact is that you've got to understand the behavior of the public sector. By nature of the public sector, some of the activities are self-generated. You just start one, and then before you know it, that one you start multiplying to 10. So you start with that first. A department is created, even at times, just to satisfy some other people. Or let us create. There are so many organizations that one can mention. That you can then start asking the question, do you need this, do you need this, do you need that? So the government needs to really sit down and look through the mandates of each of these ministries and agencies and parastatals and commissions and see whether they cannot be streamlined.
All right, interesting, Prof. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Well, that's Professor Olashinda Kintabelu, an economist, giving his perspective on what needs to be done between the federal, even at the state level. We'll be back in a moment. We'll go with one more perspective on the matter. Don't go away.